Hello and thank you for joining us. You're watching our mid-morning edition of Arirang News on this Friday, March 27th, coming to you live from Seoul. I'm Shin Se-min. Before we get started, these are the stories topping the hour. Marking the spirit of national defense, it's South Korea's 5th West Sea Defense Day. The nation remembers the soldiers who paid the ultimate sacrifice defending the country against North Korea's provocations. Standard & Poor's says Britain and the Eurozone will enter recessions this year as a flood of grim economic outlooks pour in. This as central banks and governments across the world roll out unprecedented stimulus measures to try and cushion the fallout. Plus, limited absentee ballots for South Korea's April 15th general election. The election watchdog is blocking absentee ballots in 17 countries, the hardest hit by the coronavirus, out of safety concerns. South Korea marks its 5th West Sea Defense Day on this Friday to remember those who died defending the country against North Korea's military provocations. Now, this morning's event at the Daejeon National Cemetery will be attended by around 200 relatives of the deceased, military personnel, and politicians. While the event has been largely scaled down due to the coronavirus outbreak, the Ministry of Patriots and Veterans Affairs says the spirit of national defense will never be forgotten. Now, the day, which falls on the 4th Friday of March every year, remembers the fallen in the Second Battle of Yeonpyeong in 2002, the sinking of the Cheonan warship in 2010, and the shelling of Yeonpyeong Island in that same year as well. And during our newscast, we will be cutting over to a live footage of the commemorative event to Daejeon National Cemetery for a special coverage of the event. Shifting focus, the leaders of the world's top 20 economies met virtually on Thursday, where they pledged to do whatever it takes to overcome the COVID-19 pandemic and lessen its human and economic impact. There, South Korea's President Moon Jae-in introduced Korea's swift testing and transparent quarantine system. Our presidential correspondent Kim Min-ji with the details.
The leaders of the Group of 20 vowed to present a united front in tackling the unprecedented COVID-19 pandemic. In a joint declaration following their first-ever virtual meeting on Thursday, the leaders said combating the virus calls for a transparent, robust, coordinated, and science-based global response in the spirit of solidarity. They pledged to spare no efforts to protect people, especially the most vulnerable, as well as to take aggressive fiscal measures to minimize the negative impact on the global economy, especially disruptions to trade and global supply chains. The leaders also agreed to coordinate health and financial measures and lend a helping hand to all countries in need. The video conference was arranged by Saudi Arabia, the current chair of the G20, following a request by the international community as COVID-19 entangles the world. There are more than 520,000 confirmed cases worldwide, and the death toll tops 23,000. The session not only invited G20 leaders, but also representatives of international organizations, including the United Nations, the World Health Organization, and the International Monetary Fund. During President Moon Jae-in's turn to address the group, he said South Korea is willing to share its COVID-19 response model, introducing its swift testing and quarantine system based on the nation's principles of openness, transparency, and democracy. South Korea has been praised globally for its quarantine and treatment efforts, with over 40 countries asking Seoul for COVID-19 test kits. President Moon highlighted the need for the G20 to share clinical data and their quarantine experiences, as well as cooperate on vaccine development. He also pointed out the need to use all possible means to adopt expansionary macroeconomic policies in light of the economic fallout, as well as to allow some cross-border exchanges.
President Moon proposed nations seek ways to allow for the travel of essential persons such as scientists, medical professionals, and business people to the extent it does not undermine the quarantine efforts of each country.
The G20 leaders said all necessary measures and financing will be taken to contain COVID-19, while all available policy tools will be directed at minimizing social and economic damages and ensuring the cross-border flow of essential items, noting the injection of $5 trillion into the global economy. They also pledged to work together and share all relevant information and data to overcome the pandemic, and called on the health ministers of each nation to develop urgent actions. The G20 leaders also vowed to gather again should the situation require another meeting. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Later in the afternoon, South Korea's Prime Minister Chung Se-kyun is to hold a press conference at 3 p.m. for the foreign press here in the capital of Seoul. It will be about the country's COVID-19 situation and the government's contingency plans. Along with the Prime Minister, the heads of the Office for Government Policy Coordination and Prime Minister's Secretariat will also be in attendance. The presser will be broadcast live on Arirang TV from 3 p.m. Korea time with a simultaneous English translation. Starting today, all entrants to South Korea from the United States are now subject to tougher quarantine measures as South Korea grapples with a surge in imported cases of the coronavirus. As of midnight this Friday, passengers from the U.S. who do not show symptoms such as a fever will still be required to self-isolate for 2 weeks. Now, those who show symptoms will be required to take the test upon arrival. The new measures apply to South Korean nationals and foreign travelers. South Korea has already been enforcing the same system for all long-term arrivals from Europe, regardless of their symptoms. Global economic organizations are calling for entry restrictions to be eased as the COVID-19 pandemic erodes trade and overseas business activities. Now, that includes the Federation of Korean Industries, which is calling for business people to be allowed in to prevent the global economy grinding to a complete halt. Our Lee Seung-jae reports.
The streets of Hollywood, normally crowded with tourists, looks like a ghost town. India's capital, New Delhi, always a hive of human activity, is virtually deserted as well. With 70 countries declaring lockdowns to prevent their citizens going out and potentially spreading COVID-19, the picture is similar in many places across the world. The Indian government has imposed a strict 3-week lockdown, forcing South Korean plants in the country, such as Samsung Electronics and Hyundai Motor, to close down temporarily. With enormous companies forced to cease operations, the world's economy is straining to cope, and corporations are now taking a more aggressive tone in requesting eased entry restrictions. 16 international economic organizations, including the Federation of Korean Industries, have issued a joint statement asking for more flexibility for business-related travelers. According to the KFI, foreign workers who need to return to their home countries to renew their visas need to be in self-isolation or obtain a new health certificate before returning to South Korea, a process which can take up to 2 months. During the peak of the COVID-19 outbreak in South Korea, the KFI previously called on countries to ease travel restrictions for South Korean entrepreneurs, arguing that entry for business purposes should be treated differently to entry for general travel and tourism purposes. Now, the global business community is calling for similar measures as they hope to pick up the pieces, start rebuilding their businesses, and get people back to work. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Ratings agencies forecast that a global recession may be near due to the coronavirus pandemic. Governments around the world are rolling out record-breaking stimulus packages in a bid to cushion the impact. But will it be enough to delay or stop what it seems inevitable at this point? Our Oh Jung-hee tells us more.
International ratings agencies are warning the coronavirus shock will shrink the world economy and push countries into recession. According to the AFP, S&P Global says the Eurozone and UK economies will shrink by 2% and possibly by up to 10% if the COVID-19 crisis rumbles on for a protracted period. The agency saw Britain and the Eurozone are facing recessions. Moody's forecasts that the world economy will contract by 0.5% this year, a significant drop from the initial estimate of 2.1% growth. It adds the economies of the US, Eurozone, the UK, and Japan will shrink by over 2%. Countries are rolling out enormous fiscal and monetary policy packages to cushion the coronavirus fallout. The U.S. has approved a rescue package worth $2 trillion, which amounts to roughly 10% of the country's GDP.
The total package here comes to roughly $6 trillion, $2 trillion direct assistance, roughly $4 trillion in Federal Reserve lending power, again, It'll be the largest Main Street financial package in the history of the United States.
To facilitate domestic consumption, Japan is considering issuing cash and gift certificates to the public and subsidizing travel expenses. It's a stimulus package worth $270 billion with greater government spending than in 2008 during the global financial crisis. Eurozone countries are looking at extending their bailout funds precautionary credit lines worth some 2% of a country's GDP to countries in need. 오정희, Arirang News.
The first economic data released related to the COVID-19 outbreak is starting to filter in, and to the surprise of no one, it doesn't make for pretty reading. We now know that South Korea's consumer sentiment tumbled by the most on record in the month of March. South Korea's central bank says the composite consumer sentiment index was down over 18 points on month to 78.4 this month. Now, that's the biggest monthly drop since related data was first released in July 2008. The BOK attributed the sharp decrease to the pandemic hurting the economy and household income. In addition, separate data shows that the current financial status as well as the outlook for that of households were both sharply down. The outlook for job opportunities also fell at an alarming rate, down 17 points. South Korea's election watchdog will be receiving registrations for candidates running for the April 15th general election until 6 p.m. on this Friday. But with the coronavirus pandemic gripping the world, the National Election Commission says it is halting the absentee ballot processes for Korean citizens living in 17 countries hit hard by the virus, and that's including Italy. Our Kim Hyo-sun tells us more.
South Korea's general elections are scheduled for April 15th. The candidate registration ends Friday, but many candidates have already completed the registration process, renewing their resolve to claim victory. Competition is already fierce in Seoul's Jongno-gu district, dubbed the country's #1 political street. From the ruling Democratic Party of Korea, former Prime Minister Lee Na-kyun, who is looking to boost his prospects as a future presidential candidate, is stressing that he's the man to alleviate the public's pain during this unprecedented time.
I will focus on alleviating the public's pain by truly sympathizing with them.
Hwang Kyo-wan from the main opposition United Future Party, who was the last prime minister under the ousted Park Geun-hye administration, says the general election must serve as a litmus test for the current administration's severe shortcomings.
I will devote my life to claim victory in Jongno-gu and the general election. We must test the Moon Jae-in administration so the public can regain hope.
Starting April 2nd, candidates can launch their official election campaign, but until then, only limited campaigning is allowed, including distributing business cards and establishing election offices. With concerns the elections could be overshadowed by the coronavirus outbreak, South Korea's election watchdog says it decided to stop the absentee ballot process for South Korean citizens living in Italy and 16 other badly affected countries. Such a decision comes as the National Election Commission aims to protect overseas South Koreans amid lockdowns in those regions. Kim Hyo-sun, Arirang News.
Adding to the growing laundry list of cancellations in the K-pop world, South Korean boy band BTS has postponed their upcoming North American tour due to the coronavirus pandemic. Their Map of the Soul tour was due to hit California next month, with concerts in Santa Clara on April 25th and 26th, followed by 3 days at the Rose Bowl in Pasadena in early May. Now, the band's label, Big Hit Entertainment, announced the tough decision to postpone the tour, adding that it will announce new tour dates as soon as possible. BTS had already made the decision in February to cancel 4 mid-April concerts in Seoul that would have been kicked off the tour. To help those looking to protect themselves against the coronavirus pandemic, the Seoul City government plans to distribute 600,000 face masks with replaceable filters. Now, there will also be an additional 3 million filters for foreigners who don't have the access to government-supplied masks. Currently, foreign nationals in South Korea who don't have health insurance are unable to buy face masks at pharmacies. Now, the city government said it will work with local sewing companies to produce produce 100,000 masks and 500,000 filters by Sunday this week. And by the end of April, an extra 500,000 masks and 2.5 million more filters will be distributed. A large portion of South Korea's COVID-19 cases come from people in their 20s. As such, the WHO is warning youths not to assume that the virus cannot hurt them. Our Choi Jung-yoon tells us more.
1 out of 4 people infected with the coronavirus in South Korea are in their 20s. As of Thursday, some 2,500 people in this age group have been infected, accounting for 27% of the total cases. People in their 20s accounted for almost 40% of the cases related to the Shincheonji religious group, which is linked to about half the cases in the country. But even after excluding mass infections, the Korea Centers for Disease Control and Prevention has said that the infection rate among those in their 20s is still high.
Meanwhile, experts also say that young people being comparatively more socially active could be another factor behind the high rate of infection. Here in the Hongdae area of Seoul, the streets have still been packed with people in their 20s despite the ongoing outbreak.
Active lifestyles and going to places where there's close contact with others can increase the chances of getting infected.
PC rooms and singing rooms where young people tend to visit often are small and confined. Talking in such places can increase chances of droplet transmission into the respiratory system.
Health authorities have urged young people to keep their social distancing. There are worries that young people think they're immune to the disease and so aren't being cautious enough.
I don't fear coronavirus. I think I have little chance of getting infected, so I go out at night without wearing a mask, which is hard to get hold of these days.
One expert says this comes from a more individualistic attitude among young people.
Baby boomers and the generations before them have experienced nationalism while growing up and were supportive in developing the country. But millennials pursue individual values and are not comfortable with top-down orders from the authorities.
However, the role of the youngsters is essential in combating the virus.
Young or old, everybody can get the virus. But while young people are less likely to be critical, they can infect family members and play a big part in lowering the infection rate in the whole community.
A shift in perspective is needed. Rather than fearing that they can be the victim of the virus, young people are encouraged to think of themselves as someone who could infect others. Choi Jung-yoon, Arirang News.
And to filter out some of the potential carriers of the coronavirus among entrants into South Korea, open walk-through testing booths have opened up at Int'l International Airport. Now, the system can check as many as 2,000 inbound travelers every day. Our Kim Jae-hee with this report.
The South Korean government on Thursday has set up a walk-through testing booths at Int'l International Airport to quickly detect infections coming from abroad and to save time by testing people more rapidly.
We are installing open walk-through testing station at 5 different spots within Int'l International Airport to speed up testing during the entry screening procedure.
The walk-through booths are located outdoors because the strong winds lower the risk of contamination or infection in the process of collecting samples. The open space also lowers the risk of contamination, making the process safer. Speed is another factor. People who have been tested complimented the speed and efficiency of the system.
It was really efficient. I mean, it was just 2 minutes maybe, just getting a cotton swab of my throat and putting something in my nose, so it was done really quickly, efficiently.
Health officials say each booth can test more than a dozen people an hour. That's more than 6 times faster than ordinary clinics, which can test 2 to 3 people an hour. It's even more efficient than the drive-through centers, which can test 6 to 8 people in that time. A total of 16 walk-through booths have been set up at the airport as of Thursday in both Terminals 1 and 2. But the walk-through tests are not for people with a cough, fever, or other signs of the virus. Only foreigners coming in from Europe and only those without symptoms are currently being tested here. Any Korean nationals arriving from Europe are not required to be tested. Instead, they will self-quarantine at home.
Those who are found to have no symptoms are guided to the booths. The sampling begins after they fill out a simple form. The whole process only takes around 5 minutes.
Authorities say starting Friday, the walkthrough booths will be expanded to include arrivals from the U.S. as well. Kim Jae-hee, Arirang News.
U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has suggested that North Korea has not responded to President Trump's offer to help them with the COVID-19 pandemic, adding he hopes such countries can, quote, do better for their own people. Pompeo was speaking on a radio show on Thursday, local time, where he was asked about plans in the event of a coronavirus outbreak in Venezuela. He then said countries like Venezuela and North Korea would be in a similar situation, but stressed that U.S. is doing its best to ensure humanitarian assistance gets in, suggesting Pyongyang has yet to accept Washington's offer. Now, this comes as the North revealed last weekend that President Trump sent a letter to North Korean leader Kim Jong-un offering help in the fight against the virus. Now, just in moments' time, we will be cutting over to a live video footage coming in regards to the commemorative event marking Korea's West Sea Defense Day in the central part of the nation, taking place in Daejeon National Cemetery. There, we are expected to hear from President Moon Jae-in, who will be addressing the public, mostly the bereaved family members of the soldiers who lost lives while protecting the West Sea of the nation. Now, this is the first time that we will be hearing from President Moon on this day, as it is the first time for him to be at this site at the commemorative event, that is, since taking office in May of 2017. Now, just to give you an understanding of what this day means, that day, the day of the West Sea Defense Day, is the first established to mark South Korea's commitment to continue its staunch defense of the West Sea, a region where it has been a flashpoint for North Korea's provocations in the past. Now, it looks like we are getting some live video footage of the commemorative event, which we're seeing is a commemorative video footage that's being played to all attendees at the commemorative event being held in Daejeon National Cemetery. Now, Moon is going to be among some 200 people at the event, much smaller in size, rather, as fears of the coronavirus continues to linger here in the nation. And the Ministry of Patriots and Veterans Affairs says, however, that despite the scale down of the event, it will be the spirit of that will never be forgotten.
My comrades, now rest in peace. The fallen heroes who have safeguarded the West Sea, now 10 years have passed and your children have grown. Now we stand here, but we do not shed tears. Instead of sorrow, we remember the proudness towards you, and we will maintain our lives. The fallen heroes of those who safeguarded the West Sea and the bereaved families, they have a single and last hope. My dear son, Jae-up, now it has been the 10th spring celebrating without you. I still cannot believe, and I couldn't have even imagined that I would have put my hope and my love into my heart. Just few hours back, we were talking on the phone, and you were very much looking forward to meeting the family members and wearing the T-shirt that your sister have bought. And after you have left us for the past several years, I visited the National Cemetery on a daily basis. I stood there every day and I was able to maintain my daily life by talking to myself on a daily basis, feeling like you are there by my side. At first, there was nothing much I can do other than looking at your photos and calling out your name and shedding tears. But as days passed, all of the fallen heroes of the West Sea have become my sons. Now the last hope and wish of my family, of our family, is to be able to keep a safer and stronger and peaceful country with the sacrifice of you and others, so that your sacrifice are not put in vain. My son, I don't know how many spring days must pass before we finally meet. But I hope you rest in peace. I love you, Taeyop, and I miss you. We couldn't believe it at first. All of the sacrifices of the 52 fallen soldiers and your noble sacrifice and courage have enabled us to stand strong. And just like that day, we will safeguard the Republic of Korea. And as we commemorate the fallen heroes of the West Sea, I believe that we shall remember them, and this is the only way for us to safeguard our own nation. Next, we have Mr. President with the commemorative speech. Fellow Koreans, war veterans and bereaved families, we commemorate the West Sea Defense Day today at a time when patriotism is most needed. Based on patriotism, we overcame colonization and war and also achieved economic growth and democracy.
2020
democracy. With a sense of solidarity and cooperation, we were able to overcome the difficulties that we have faced. And the drive was patriotism, which is our love for our territory, neighbor, and history. The sacrifice and dedication of the fallen heroes who safeguarded our West Sea are the exact symbols of such patriotism. Even at the crossroads of life and death, amid bullets and firing, the fallen heroes carried out their missions with an iron will, exerting a sense of comradeship, and completed their missions as soldiers until the very end. The patriotism put forth by our heroes have now become peace and freedom for our homeland. This has enabled us to stand strong with unwavering and robust defense, and also enabled us to stand at the forefront of credibility and cooperation of the international community. The citizens of South Korea here not only at the Daejeon National Cemetery, but also in all corners of the country, remember the patriotism put forth by our brave heroes. At the Changwon Jinhae Marine Park and at the campus of Seoul Sudo Electric Technical High School, we faced the noble sacrifice of Warrant Officer Han Jun-ho. At Gwangju Munsong Middle School, Gunsan Eunpa Park, we also encounter Staff Sergeant Seo Jung-woo and Private First Class Moon Kwang-woo, and once again remember their unwavering courage. I would like to extend my respect to all of the fallen heroes who have become the pride of all of our citizens. And I said my words of comfort to the bereaved families. War veterans and bereaved families, facing an unprecedented crisis presented by the coronavirus, our military and their families are standing at the forefront of patriotism. Bereaved Family Association of 46 Soldiers and Cheonan Warship Foundation donated money and protective face masks to Daegu and Gyeongsang-buk-do province. Your solidarity and cooperation have become the beacon of hope for many. Newly appointed nurse officers and military surgeons ran directly to the front line of our fight against COVID-19, the Daegu city. The reserve nurse officers also volunteered to help, while 35,000 soldiers voluntarily donated their blood. Army engineers dispatched to the Daegu Military Hospital made hospital beds for the patients. 12,000 soldiers and 6,000 military equipment have been mobilized to support quarantine and disinfection across the country. Air Force planes have flown 20 hours straight to bring back 80,000 protective gowns all the way from Myanmar. The spirits of the heroes who safeguarded the West Sea are now engraved deeply in the hearts of our soldiers, as the beliefs of military for the people and devotion to the country, calling as soldiers, are being practiced, and I believe that the fallen heroes will also be very proud of you. Fellow Koreans, we must win in fights. And if we can claim victory without having to fight, we must choose such a path. The strongest security is peace, and peace is the way for us to repay to the sacrifice of the fallen heroes. My administration, based on strong army and steadfast defense capability, is committed to making strong security and peace. The government has expanded defense budget for the past 3 years. We have ushered in an era of 50 trillion won in defense costs for the first time this year, and we have become the world's 6th largest military worldwide. In 2018, the September 19 Inter-Korea Military Agreement has put a halt to all hostile military activities on the West Sea. At the NLO, protected by our heroes, we are not witnessing a single arms clash. At the 2nd Fleet Command in Pyeongtaek and the coasts of Baekneung Island, Yeonhwari, Our soldiers are still carrying out their missions to safeguard our homeland and the waters. Fishermen stand at the fisheries of peace that have been secured by our heroes, looking at the Yeonpyeong Island lighthouse that has been lit back in 45 years, having high hopes to return with a full load of fish. My administration will establish eternal peace with robust security. With unwavering military readiness, we will always remember the sacrifice of our fallen heroes. Together with the public who trust and support the military, we will usher in the road for peace and prosperity. We will also exert our utmost effort to respect those who have sacrificed and dedicated their lives for the nation. The fallen soldiers of the Second Yeonpyeong Sea Battle were once regarded as those who died on duty instead of those who died during battle. While the participatory government made regulations for them, it couldn't be implemented back then. Finally, in June of 2018, the cabinet meeting passed the ordinance on the special act to compensate those who died during the Second Yeonpyeong Sea Battle. In 16 years, they were respected as persons killed in war, and their dignities have been thus raised. This was indeed a very meaningful moment. And last year in December, we improved our criteria for payment of pension for the bereaved of those who died on duty. We raised up the payment criteria to 43% regardless of their time in service. In addition, we implemented incentive systems, intensifying the financial support for the bereaved families. And for men of national merit who are wounded during war, we have also introduced new compensation measures. This year's 16.3 billion won war wound benefit will be increased by fivefold to 63.2 billion by next year. By truly honoring our veterans and men of national merit, and the bereaved families will be proud. And this is only possible when our citizens are proud of this. The nation must be responsible for the sacrifices and dedication put forth by our soldiers. With true honoring of them, the spirit of patriotism will be deeply rooted in our daily lives, and I will make sure that this is not affected by politics. Fellow Koreans, war veterans, and bereaved families, patriotism is indeed the strongest security. It is the very foundation for an unwavering nation. At the hearts of our soldiers, the patriotism of the fallen soldiers should be carried on. And as long as the history of patriotism lives in the public's memory, can we truly overcome any crisis that we face. Today, as we fight against the coronavirus, we once again witness our patriotism being exerted as solidarity and cooperation. We are becoming great help to each other, and this is now leading to the cooperation of the international community. Robust and strong trees are full of life. With a sense of patriotism, we will make the Republic of Korea a more robust and strong country. And within a sense of cooperation, the international community will remember the new history of peace and prosperity. Today, as we commemorate the fallen heroes, marking the West Sea Defense Day, I once again renew our resolves to overcome the coronavirus outbreak. The stories of the fallen heroes who safeguarded our West Sea shall become proud history of patriotism and will be delivered eternally to our generations to come. Thank you.
There you have it. We just heard President Moon Jae-in's remarks on the West Sea Defense Day on this Friday, March 27th. Now, this today was the first attendance in person for President Moon since taking office in the year of 2017. Now, just to recap some of the information that we just heard from the president, we heard that President paid tribute to the fallen heroes in the defense of the nation's West Sea and also relay condolences to the bereaved family members from those those events. Now, just to remind you that West Sea is where it has been a flashpoint for some provocative actions being done by North Korea in the past couple of years. And the president, amid the ongoing COVID-19 outbreak here in the nation, also relayed appreciation for the country's servicemen and servicewomen who have rolled up their sleeves in helping to contain the virus in the nation. Now, he also renewed promise to reach and establish ultimate peace on the Korean Peninsula through strong and unwavering defense capabilities. One regrettable point from the president's remarks, though, we weren't able to hear much about President refer to the soldiers lost in the 3 occasions, the Second Battle of Yeonpyeong in 2002 and the North Korea torpedo of South Korean warship in 2010 and North Korea's shelling of Yeonpyeong-do Island, killing at least 2 civilians and 2 other South Korean soldiers. Given that this was the first for President Moon to be at the site marking the date. But with that wraps up for us at this hour on Arirang News. We'll be back with more of the news lineup coming up in our later newscast at noon Korea time. Thank you for watching and goodbye.